All right. Thank you all. Thank you for coming down to UiPath Developer Conference. Very warm Happy New Year to all of you. My name is Anirudh. I'm a part of the customer success team with UiPath. I'm also joined with Mr. Karuna, who's a veteran with UiPath and a functional architect. Today, we're going to talk about how to identify the right processes for automation, and specifically for RPA. And why do we say this is a very important stage is if we do this stage properly, we have a smooth outcome from RPA, the thing which you set out to achieve, basically to get the right ROI. All right, so to begin with, do we have the slides here? The next slide. There's no clicker. Sorry. Okay, to begin with, let us just quickly go through a typical RPA delivery model. So the first stage that you see on the screen is prepare RPA. What we do in this stage is basically identify the process and also set up our implementation approach, the team that is required to perform this whole development project. Post this, once we have a successful sign-off from our sponsors, which we move on to a solution design stage, where the blueprint is designed for the developers to then go ahead and develop the workflows. Post the solution design, we go into the build RPA solution, which all of us would be much aware because it's a developer conference. Then we move into the testing phase, which would have unit testing, a regression testing, and finally a user acceptance testing. And post which, we finally hand over the project into the hypercare stage, which is a production stage, but we follow a volume ramp-up kind of a scenario in which we give 10 to 15% of the volume at the first go and slowly ramp up, and then finally move into a full-fledged solution, full-fledged production environment. So what should we look to automate? So if I have to ask you, what are the best or the top categories a processor should be looked upon, what would you feel that, what should we look to automate? So what do you think would be the characteristics? Repetitive, yeah, repetitive. Rule-based. Time-consuming. Right. Fragmented systems. Correct. So yeah, most of us were absolutely on the target. So highly manual and repetitive process. Rule-based processes. Processes with low exception rate. And why do you think we say processes with low exception rate should be targeted first? So anyone? Faster deployment? Yeah. Processes with standard readable electronic inputs, which is basically the input data should be digital. We are not looking into image-based processing at the first stage itself. High volumes, low complexity. Stable processes. Yeah, if your processes keeps on changing from time to time, it's not a good candidate to take without a transformational journey for the process. Process performed by large teams. Yeah. So you don't take a process which is just done by one person throughout the year. You need a larger process. Mature processes, swivel chair processes. Yeah. Progressing with the same thought, what should we look to automate? So the key thing that we are trying to tell in here is not all processes are ready for automation, right? So in order to get the best benefit of the ROI, we should choose processes which has gone through a transformational journey first, and then look to perform an RPA over it, right? So we saw most of the blue boxes in the previous slide, but what we have tried to do is connect them and prepare a guide, a kind of a checklist, so that it's easier for us to understand what should we automate. So if you look into that, we start with checking highly manual and repetitive. If it is yes, move on to rule-based check, and so on and so forth. But if it is a no, it has to go into application of the process improvement. It could be anything. It could be your small Six Sigma black belt project, right? Yeah, and then when you get all the yeses, you finally move into your RPA, right? Process characteristics, let's find out. So these are the characteristics we already spoke about in our previous slides. So I have 3 processes, and I have a few sample, let's say, sample results of all these processes when we have put them across these characteristics. So process A, B, and C. Whom do you think has qualified the most for RPA? Yes, louder please. A, A. Most of us, A, think A is the right process? C? Okay. Well, A1. And why do you feel that A should be the number 1 process? There are no much system changes, and in fact, it has scored the most of all of the characteristics. It is not just one single characteristic. We have to look into everything. So yes, A will go through an RPA stage. What happens to C? Now someone mentioned C. What do you think should happen with C? All right, no problem. So what do you think should happen to C now? Perfect, yes. Process A is best for automation. Process B would follow process A. And C, yes, it should be subjected to a lean transformational journey first. And the quality guys can be happy with this.
So till now we viewed the processes from a business perspective, right? So we saw it, if you remember all the pointers that we said, which will be more suitable for automation in the first place, were the pointers which were more relevant to generate our ROI at a rapid pace, correct? Now we will look at the pointers and the factors which define complexity of a specific process from technical angle, from the line of development, right? Number 1 will be the number of screens in a specific process. A number of screens can also be considered as number of steps within a specific process. If the number of steps are large in number, then of course the development timeline will increase, and which in turn will increase the complexity of the process, right? And so is the variations and scenarios within a specific process. If there are many n number of variations within a specific process, ideally we would apply the 80-20 rule, wherein we say that find 80% of the volume within this process will stick on to a limited number of variations and scenarios, while the 20% apply to the larger variations and scenarios, we omit that and we move forward. But still, if a process has larger amount of variations and scenarios within it, then it might not be a right process to pick up at the first place. And similarly, if the process has standard inputs, it's better to have standard inputs. Standard input, what it means by standard inputs, it's about the templated input. So input doesn't change much. It stays as it is. For example, the invoices which goes from an organization stays in the same template, right? That's considered to be a standard input. And if the automation is an image-based automation, for example, if it is on top of a Citrix or VDI, it increases the development timeline. And that is the reason we say that if it is based on a VDI or on a Citrix, it should be considered as a complex process and at the complexity area of the spectrum when we consider the complexity factors of a specific process. And if there are a larger amount of free text which is involved within a specific process, I can give an example. Let's say there is a process which goes through the BPM tool or the workflow tool, wherein people have to write notes after they complete that specific activity within a specific process, right? What is the process? The process has multiple steps and multiple teams are involved and they complete that specific process. And if one person has completed and they add on notes and those notes are taken up and then the second activity is performed on top of it. If that is the case, the bot needs to have the understanding of the free text, right? And that in turn increases the complexity because building a model with NLP will of course take more time than having a ready deployable RPA end workflow. And similarly, structured inputs, if the process has structured inputs, it'll be a simpler process, while if the inputs are unstructured, it'll be more complex to digitalize that and then to have it in a format, a robot-readable format or a machine-readable format. Types of application and number of applications. Again, if there are more number of applications, then we need to spy the elements within that specific applications multiple times. And again, based on experience, we have seen that the mainframe, the SAP, takes more time than the Windows-based applications and the web-based applications while they are involved in a specific process. We say that these are the major factors, the technical factors that define the complexity of a specific process, but of course this is not the exhaustive list. There can be many other factors, and which is very dependent on organization, which is very specific to a specific organization and their strategy. It depends on their strategy. But yeah, these can be taken up as a guidelines, and these factors are majorly involved in most of the processes, and every other organization can align to this when we talk about the factors that define complexity of a specific process. So now we have tried to align, so when we are defining the complexity, if you're not having a realistic timeline against, when we say if a process is low complex, medium complex, or highly complex, it doesn't make any sense. So based on our experience, we have come up with the number stating that fine, if a process that falls into a low complexity, then what would be the realistic timeline for the delivery of that specific process? Similarly, the medium and the high complexity processes. So what we have tried to do is we have tried to align the numbers. For example, the number of applications involved. If it is 1 or 2 applications, it's considered to be low complex process. If it is 3 or 4, then it's considered to be medium complexity. And if it is greater than 5, it's considered to be high complexity, right? And the visuals are available in the screen. Basically, in each of these pointers, like number of screens, if it is 1 to 4 screens, then of course the process, the number of steps within those screens, even if it is more, you are just spying a specific screen, right? So then it becomes a low complexity process. If it is somewhere between 4 to 40, it's considered to be medium, and if it is greater than 40, it's considered to be high complexity process. And the business rules and logics, the scenarios, if it is less than 5, without an alternative flow, it's considered to be low complexity. And if it is 5 to 50, it's considered to be medium. And greater than 50, it's considered to be high complexity. So what we are trying to do over here, so we are aligning the factors. We are saying, fine, if these factors has these figures, then those needs to be aligned with the low, medium, and high, right? Let's take an example. Let's say that a specific process has these criteria. It has 3 to 4 applications. It has 4 to 40 screens. And it has 5 to 50 business rules and the ones which are colored, right? So it has these scenarios. So there is a possibility that a process might not fall into, all the factors might not fall into medium, but then few here and few there, right? So in this, and even at a larger way, what we need to do over here is we need to understand what makes more time, what takes more time for us to develop a specific process. We can align weightages to these factors, and we can do a sum product that as we think that it would impact the complexity of the specific process, and we can arrive at the complexity level, and similarly to the complexity timelines. Okay. So we have spoken about the simpler repetitive processes. We have spoken about the timelines that take from complexity to the, we have aligned the timelines, and we have seen now there are many processes which has unstructured inputs, which has many things, right? So we should not really stick to these components, stating that fine, if this is rules-based or if it has structured inputs or not. We should also have an eye for intelligent process automation. Why? Because based on our experience, we can diligently say that if we are able to solve that specific complex problem, then the benefits are increase exponentially. So if we are able to solve a specific problem, which is a complex problem statement within a specific process, which can be replicated across the other processes, and if we can scale that up, then of course the whole increase in benefits is very much higher. When I say that, what I mean is basically, let's pick up the specific RPA. RPA is a very powerful term which has been coined, and on top of RPA, we have these elements, and we have an ecosystem within UiPath as well, which enables you to automate processes which are not only fit for RPA, but also fit for an intelligent process automation, right? So if you take any process, there are three major components to a specific process. One is the data side of it, wherein the inputs or outputs are considered. And second one is the judgment side of it, whether it is rules-based or whether it is a classification, or whether it is a prediction or what it is, right? And third is the action, whether a human is making those actions based on the data and the judgment, or it is a system or an application which takes that action on top of it, right? We have tried to align what components can be used where to solve these problems. So we, in UiPath, we have a window for NLP. We have integrated with Stanford NLP. We have a window for custom Python activity. So if the data is unstructured, or if it is semi-structured, if it is image-based, we have integration with OCR tools. So basically, we can include these components which is there within UiPath, and we can try to solve that problem. And similarly, if it is judgment-based, of course, there will be the machine learning side of things which will get involved. And we have integration with H2.ai. We have integration with Azure ML platform. We have integration with my Amazon machine learning platforms and Google Cloud machine learning platforms and so, right? Which we will see in the next slide. And if it is system-driven, then of course the system will take care of the automation. But if it is human-driven, we need to deploy the robotic process automation, which is the process automation workflow. So we spoke a bit about the intelligent automation in our previous slide. And let's dive more deeper. So there are three areas which I'd like to cover in detail in this spectrum. Will be the intelligent OCR, ML, and DL platforms, the NLP digital assistance, and the process intelligence, basically the data that comes out of a specific process. So what does an intelligent OCR means, or what does the ML DL platform provides is? So the ML and DL platforms and intelligent OCR can provide us two things. One is converting the unstructured and semi-structured information into a structured way. Two is if the judgment is based on prediction or classification or recognition, it can be taken care by the ML platforms that we have in place, right? And similarly, the digital assistance and NLP, it's more into understanding the human language wherever there is conversation. One such example can be in a contact center, wherein the chatbots are used for conversations. There are organizations wherein people do chat with the people, with the customers, and they provide the information which is required by the customers. Just because the RPA platform cannot understand those languages. So the Code.ai and the IBM Watson, the Stanford NLP, these help to understand the human languages, the natural language that we speak and that we write, and then they help with the intent for the bots to process any specific activity. And the process intelligence, basically how it helps us with the process informations and the process matrices. Basically, there can be ways wherein a process is defined in a specific way by a SME, right? We are sitting next to a SME, we are understanding the process. The SME might feel that this is how the process might work, and that will be the ideal way, right, of working of that specific process or on operation of that specific process. But if we start using these tools, we get an understanding that that is not the way in which the process is being happening for a long time in the organization. There are many deviations which happen, and those insights are driven by the process mining tools, and those are very difficult to get it from in person when we have these discussions with people.
Yeah, so whatever we have spoken until now, what we want to reiterate is this is a very important stage of any RPA delivery lifecycle. And every lifecycle has its phases, and these are the phases which goes behind our identification. And for each phase, we should have a clear-cut deliverables as well. So when we talk about process assessment, it is not just a PPT that you create. It should have a PPT, of course, but it should have all those criterias in it. It should have, you should be able to define the process well, the feasibility should be mentioned, complexity, effort, everything has to be there. It should be a proper business case per se. right? Implementation plan, how much time would it take to implement? Which are the teams which would be involved in? What are the roles that we should be looking into, etc. And of course, one thing which most of us would not do is the system compatibility assessment upfront, which is a very important thing again. We do not know how a target application would behave with UiPath and which version of UiPath. So we should do a small POC just to identify what can be done using UiPath on that target application and what cannot be. This will also define how much time it would take and what would be your automation percentage at the end of the business case. Of course, we prepare the process definition document and the solution definition documents. These are the two major documents which would be prepared. It can be one single document, but it can be both as well. So we are not worried about how many documents you create here. It is just that all these things has to be there in either one or can be 6 documents. All right, so let's go ahead and define some do's and don'ts of what should be done in this stage. Always use the checklist method to quantitatively perform the process assessment. Always perform a technical feasibility with the target applications before assessing the complexity. It is very important. And always organize a pipeline rather than just choosing one process and going ahead. Prepare a pipeline and then move ahead. Right. May we know some do's and we already spoke about do's. Let's speak about don'ts now. Never believe solely on the SME. We have seen in many cases that the SME would not give the right picture, would not be able to give all the scenarios, might miss one or two scenarios here and there, and then when we are moving into production, we know it's failing because of one such scenario, and most of the volumes is having that scenario. Right? Most of the developers would feel me. All right. Yeah, never pick a process which is constantly going through a change. Again, there's a target application which would get into a new version in the next 2 months. Right? Your development time itself would be 2 months. You end up developing the whole process and your target application has changed. And you have to redo the whole thing all over again. It does not help neither us as the developers or the project managers. Never refer everything for RPA. Yeah, very important. If you have an Excel application and it is only the Excel application on which you have to do the few activities on it, maybe prepare a macro. Do not do an RPA for it. Right? That's not a business case which would fly with, and that's why we say don't kill a fly using a gun. Right? And never pick one specific process to proceed with feasibility and viability analysis. So what do we exactly mean here?
Means we have experience in many cases wherein organizations pick up a specific process and they proceed with feasibility and viability analysis. Right? The challenge over there is if we don't have a pipeline and if we are just picking one specific process and moving ahead with feasibility, the process may be a better fit, may not be a better fit. Maybe it's possible that the process might go through the whole lot of the journey of transformation, re-engineering and stuff, and then RPA should plug in. And based on that, the larger decision should not be taken, right? And similarly, viability. And when we are talking about viability, it's about the ROI, right? Getting a rapid ROI in a specific process. And it's not about one process, it's about generating ROI from RPA and the transformation journey that an organization has visualized, right? Based on the automation strategy and the business strategy of the organization. So it always makes sense to have a pipeline, have the high-level business case around a set of processes rather than picking one process. Because there are cases wherein one process might not make any sense, but multiple processes clubbed together might make more sense. Because one bot can perform multiple processes. Of course, not simultaneously, but at different point in time. So let's have a broader look on how the process identification has been in the past, how it is right now, and how we are seeing that it will be in the future. So initially, while RPA was a larger thing in the market, most of the process identification and the steps were more or less intuition-based, wherein people view the process, they say that fine, this can be automated, this cannot be, just just omit this part and say that fine, build a business case around this and propose it to the stakeholders, right? And while we started maturing, and even at this point in time, we use the well-defined tools, methodologies. We have a quantitative approach for calculating the complexities, the automation potential for a specific process. So we have these factors. We align our factors with the numbers that are supposed to be aligned, and we say that fine, the structured approach of process identification will help us to a larger extent, and we'll have a structured approach to it. And now we also have the process mining tools which will give us the process intelligence, and the technologies like Minute, like Celonis. So they give us the process insights which a person cannot take up. And it's very difficult to understand it from the SME, from the human discussions, and that augmenting the process identification. Of course, that's not enough to have the process identified and align the numbers against the complexities and the potentials, but yeah, that augment your process identification along with your structured approach. And in future, we are seeing the smart recorders and stuffs which will do automatic recording of the process, understanding what is being done in a system, and coming up with the complexity, with the timelines, with the automation potential and stuff. And that's where the future is driven using technology. And here are a few key points. So which is, Minute says that 50% of the RPA opportunities are being missed currently because of the lack of technological improvement in this specific space. And around 20 to 30% of the overall effort in identifying a specific process is expected to be reduced while we use technology to identify the processes which are better fit for automation. And of course, the accuracy of effort estimations and the automation potential and the benefits are going to increase if you use technology and a structured approach for process identification. And this is all from our end. Thank you very much.
Sorry, so if you have any questions, we have around 5 minutes to answer now, or we have booth outside which can take more questions from you. Yes, sir.
Very good afternoon. That was really an amazing tips from you guys. So being a developer, like I have one main problem, like always when we go ahead with a process, identifying a right process, right? So we go ahead, develop, put it in test, it works fine. QA, it works fine. And production, the first day it fails. So I hope all agree with me, right? So how do we efficiently validate our environments first? Because most of the cases, we have to impress the client, showing the results that this is your process. It was taking 2 hours, and now it's taking just 2 minutes, right? So how do we make sure all these environments are tested and make sure there is no differences, that slight differences is making the bot to fail? So any tips or any advices?
Yeah, so really good question from an implementation point of view. So basically what we recommend for such scenarios is to have an environment which is a replica of what it is in production. If not all the data sets, but at least for past 3 months or 6 months. If you have the replica of what we have in production in our UAT environment, we might not go through what you're suggesting, right?
Yeah, and probably we need more closer interaction with the IT team so that they can expose their production environment maybe for once, and you test the selectors out in there and you verify that yes, it is the same selector attributes which is showing up. Though it may not happen, but yeah, that could be one approach.
Okay, I'll stick to this slide, but yeah, I'll go through it. So basically, if I get your question right, so what we are saying is for one process, what is the number of people, how many developers are we aligned with the timelines that we are seeing? Okay, so when we are, a process can be defined very differently from person to person, from organization to organization, right? So we are talking about a sub-process at the L4 level. And when we take that, we are talking about one developer within the timelines.
But it would come out more clearly when you do the solution design, because it would give you the number of XAML files that you might develop. And post which you can check your bandwidth. Do you have 2 developers which is free? Probably yes, use them. So basically talking about the attended kind of a scenario. Well, this doesn't look like an unattended.
I kind of got your
Yeah.
question. So what you're saying is it's not straight through RPA, but we are using some intelligent technologies. And for example, I can give you an example. You can let me know if I'm right or wrong. So basically, let's say that we are using a OCR platform. We are trying to extract information out of it. And now before processing, you want a person to verify that and then to take it up. That's okay. So even then it can be done. So basically the workflow needs to be triggered that way. So it can be aligned. For example, the OCR comes up in between, right, of the process. And the OCR, there can be a threshold again, stating that fine, you can have probabilities and thresholds and confidence levels within those data fields which are being extracted by the OCRs. And once you have that, you can say that fine, if it is above 90%, then fine, let it process. If it is below, I want a person to verify it or to modify it and have a learning in the loop, right? And a human in the loop. So then those will be routed through the exception queue to the person to attend. And once they confirm on, they can plug those data sets within the machine readable formats in a specific location. And as per the schedule, the bot can pick it up and perform the rest of the processes. Did I answer your question? Thanks.
All right.
I think over there.
Okay.
Yes, there are. We can take it up in the booth because that will require more discussion.
All right, so that's all from us. We are late for the next session. So thank you all again for coming down. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.